Welcome to Scoli Sleep Stories. Before we begin, take a moment to get comfortable, let the day soften around you, and settle in for a calm documentary made for curious minds. If these stories help you rest, learn, or simply enjoy a quieter part of the day, please consider liking this episode and subscribing to the channel. Now, when you are ready, let us begin. Chapter 1. Before the Key. Imagine a room, cool and shaded, tucked away from the heat of a long afternoon. The floor is packed earth, swept smooth by many years of quiet footsteps. Against one wall stand jars of grain, their rounded shoulders catching what little light drifts through a high, narrow opening. The air smells faintly of dust and dry wheat, of stored things resting in the dark. Across the doorway lies a single wooden beam, thick as a strong arm, settled into sockets carved into the frame on either side. It is the simplest of arrangements, and yet it carries a great deal of meaning. The beam is not decorated, it is not clever, but it says plainly and firmly that this space is closed, and that whatever waits inside is meant to remain there. Long before there were keys and before there was anything we might recognize as a lock, there was this quiet human wish to keep certain things safe. People gathered food and did not wish to lose it. They shaped tools with patience and did not wish them scattered or taken. They kept animals, cloth, household goods, and small treasured objects. They set aside places for worship and places where the affairs of a community were recorded and remembered. Gradually, people learned to control the way in and the way out. They did not always use mechanisms and rarely used anything so precise as a key. Instead, they used barriers. A barrier is simply something that blocks movement. In early settlements, it might have been a heavy stone rolled across the mouth of a storage pit, a woven screen leaned against an opening, or a mound of earth shaped to turn a path aside. Such things did not test anyone. They did not ask who a person was. They merely stood in the way. To pass them, someone had to move them. Moving them took effort, and effort took time. Sometimes that was enough. Among the most enduring of these early barriers was the humble bar or bolt. A bolt is a sliding piece that holds a door, lid, or gate in place. Lay a beam across a doorway, drop it into sockets on either side, and the door can no longer swing open. There's a satisfying finality to the movement. You can almost feel the weight settling and hear the soft, low knock of wood meeting wood. A latch works on a similar idea, though more lightly. It is a movable fastening that holds a door closed until someone lifts or moves it again. A quiet latch dropping under its own weight is one of the simplest sounds in the long history of security. And latches were everyday tools for keeping things shut. Versions of them have been used for so long and in so many places that we cannot point to a single moment when they were invented. Yet a bar is not quite a lock. This distinction is worth pausing over, because it sits at the center of our story. A bar or bolt prevents movement. A lock adds something more. It introduces a small mechanical question. It is no longer only, is this door closed? It becomes, who is permitted to open it? A lock controls movement through some kind of test. A key supplies the shape, motion, code, or credential that satisfies that test. The key may be a shaped piece of wood or metal. In later ages, it may be a remembered number, a card, a radio signal, or information stored by a computer. But the idea remains much the same. The lock waits for the right answer before allowing something to move. That shift, from simple obstruction to a mechanism that distinguishes between those who may enter and those who may not, arrived slowly. Its earliest forms left few traces behind. The absence of evidence is itself part of the history. Much of what early people used to secure their belongings was made from materials that did not last. Wood decays, rope frays and rots, leather cracks and crumbles into the soil, knots loosen and disappear entirely. When archaeologists try to understand early barriers, they often work from what remains around the edges. They study the shape of a doorway, tool marks, sockets cut into stone, and the occasional fragment preserved in an unusually dry place. They compare these traces with later practices and surviving examples. Our picture of that distant world must therefore be held gently. Some parts are clearly visible, others are careful reconstruction. One early method did leave impressions behind, quite literally. Long before dependable locking mechanisms, many societies used seals. A seal was not necessarily a lock. It might not stop anyone from opening a container or doorway. Instead, it could reveal that opening had occurred. A cord might be wrapped around the neck of a jar. Its ends could be pressed into a small lump of soft clay. A carved stone, ring, or cylinder would then be stamped or rolled across the clay, leaving a distinct impression. Once dry, the clay held the mark like a signature. If the jar were opened, the cord or clay seal would have to be disturbed. The damage could be seen. This is what we mean by tamper evident. It does not necessarily prevent interference. It provides evidence that something has been disturbed. A steward might seal a storeroom and later examine the clay to see whether the entrance had been opened. An official might seal a container or document so that any disturbance would become visible. The seal could speak on behalf of someone who was not present. It was a solution based not only on materials, but also on trust and observation. This reminds us that security has always been social as well as mechanical. Family presence mattered. Neighbors mattered. Guards, gatekeepers, shared customs, and knowledge of who belonged in a place could matter as much as hardware. A storehouse might be protected partly by its door, and partly by the fact that people nearby knew who was allowed inside. A guarded entrance might need no complex lock if the guard recognized everyone who approached. Community habits could provide a kind of living barrier. We should not imagine that every ancient home stood behind a private locked door. Ideas about property, privacy, and household space varied widely. In some places, the most carefully controlled areas were not private rooms, but storerooms, sacred spaces, administrative rooms, or buildings holding supplies and records. The wish to protect things was widespread. The form that protection took depended on how people lived, what they stored, and whom they trusted. Locks, when they appeared, did not make bars, guards, seals, and tapers, or careful habits, unnecessary. Security has nearly always depended on several things working together. A fine lock is of limited use if the door is weak, the hinges are loose, or the key is carelessly managed. The mechanism is only one part of a larger arrangement. Beneath all this variety runs a quiet thread. Wherever people gathered things worth keeping, they found ways to hold them safe. A stone, a screen, a wooden beam settling into sockets, rope fibers tightening around a jar, a seal pressed into cool clay. These were the early relatives of every lock that followed. Many have vanished, worn away by time, yet they carried the seed of an enduring idea. For a moment, we can rest again in that shaded storeroom. The grain sits undisturbed in its jars. The beam lies steady across the doorway. Somewhere nearby, a household continues with its evening, trusting that what has been closed will remain closed until it is needed again. It is a small and ordinary piece, and it is very old. From that simple wooden bar, we can now move toward a more thoughtful mechanism. The next door does not open merely because someone can lift a beam. It waits for a broad wooden key, and for several small pins to rise together. Chapter 2: Wooden Locks of the Ancient World. Picture a broad wooden key resting in the palm. It is larger than most keys carried today, yet surprisingly light. Along one side are projecting wooden teeth. They have been shaped to meet something hidden inside a door. Nearby, sun-warmed timber frames the entrance to a shaded storeroom. Within the door is a horizontal bolt, fitted into a carved channel. When the bolt slides one way, the door is secured. When it slides the other, the door is released. But the bolt cannot move freely. Several openings have been cut into it. From above, rounded wooden pins drop into those openings. Once the pins have fallen into place, they join the bolt to the surrounding structure. The bolt is held still. This is a pin lock, a mechanism in which movable pins prevent a bolt from sliding. To open it, a person inserts the large toothed key beneath the pins. The key rises, its teeth meet the lower ends of the pins, and lift them. When all the pins reach suitable heights, they leave the openings in the bolt. The bolt is free to move. The motion is simple and calm. The key enters, the pegs rise, the bolt slides through its channel with a dry whisper. At the end comes a soft knock as wood reaches its resting place. Among the earliest known lock traditions are wooden pin-based mechanisms associated with ancient Egypt and the wider Near East. They are often presented in popular accounts as the first locks, sometimes with very confident dates. The surviving evidence asks us to speak more carefully. Securely dated evidence for pin lock technology exists in the ancient Near East during the first millennium BCE. Some Egyptian associations may be older. However, the precise date and place of the earliest pin lock remain uncertain. This uncertainty is not unusual. Archaeology rarely offers a complete wooden door with its lock still fitted and ready to use. Wood survives poorly in many environments. Metal fittings may corrode, be removed, or be recycled. Objects can also become separated from the doors, boxes, or buildings to which they once belonged. A date assigned to an ancient lock fragment may refer to the archaeological layer or site where it was found. It does not always reveal the exact year when the object was made. Images, fittings, written references, and later examples can help, but each contributes only part of the picture. Modern reconstructions are useful here. A reconstruction is a model based on surviving evidence. It allows researchers and museum visitors to see how a proposed arrangement might have worked. Yet a reconstruction remains an interpretation. It helps us understand the mechanism without pretending that every detail is known. Even with these cautions, the wooden pin lock is a graceful achievement. It transforms a plain bolt into a mechanism that responds to a particular object. The key does not simply push the bolt aside. It first arranges the internal pieces so that movement becomes possible. In this sense, the key supplies an answer. The pins form the question. Are they raised to the required positions? The key's teeth provide the response. When their shape is suitable, the pins rise together, and the mechanism agrees to move. This principle resembles the much later pin tumbler lock. A tumbler is a movable internal part that must reach a suitable position. In both the ancient wooden form and the modern metal cylinder, several movable pieces prevent motion until they are correctly aligned. The resemblance is important, but it should not be overstated. It does not prove that one design passed unchanged through every century, from ancient Egypt to the modern front door. Technologies can be forgotten, reinvented, adapted, and transformed. Similar mechanical ideas may appear in very different materials and settings. The ancient wooden lock was built on the scale of carpentry. Its key could be long enough to carry over a shoulder. Its bolt was broad, and its pins were large enough to see clearly. The whole mechanism was suited to timber, dry air, and doors with enough thickness to contain it. The later cylinder lock would compress the same broad idea into a small metal body, using narrow pins and tiny springs. The conceptual echo is clear, even though the engineering is very different. These early locks probably served places where controlled storage mattered. Grain, tools, textiles, household goods, records, and other supplies could be kept behind substantial doors. In a dry storeroom, wood was readily available and familiar to skilled craftspeople. A carpenter could carve channels, fit pegs, shape a bolt, and make a matching key. Each piece needed to move smoothly enough to work, but not so loosely that the pins failed to hold the bolt. The lock was still only part of the arrangement. The strength of the timber, the door frame, the hinges, and the habits of the people using the room all mattered. A lock does not create absolute security. It controls one movement under certain conditions and makes unauthorized entry more difficult or more noticeable. The key also creates a new responsibility. A plain beam can be lifted by anyone standing on the correct side. A pin lock requires the shaped object that raises the pins. Whoever keeps that object carries the practical ability to release the door. The key may remain in a nearby room. It may be entrusted to a steward or household member. It may be large enough that its absence is easy to notice. In every case, the mechanism turns possession into permission. We can imagine the broad key hanging from a peg in a cool interior passage. Its wood is polished where hands have held it. It is a tool, neither mysterious nor ornamental, shaped for one quiet task. When needed, it is lifted from the peg and carried to the storeroom. The teeth enter beneath the pins. The pegs rise. The bolt slides. Then, after the needed goods are removed or returned, the bolt travels back, and the pins settle again under their own weight. The room is closed once more. As metalworking became more widespread in other ancient settings, keys could become smaller and more durable. They could be carried more easily from room to room, worn at the hand or belt, and made in a greater variety of forms. The broad wooden key now gives way to bronze and iron, to curved hooks and turning shafts, and to the portable keys of Greece and Rome. Chapter 3: Greece, Rome, and portable keys. A small bronze key catches a muted line of lamplight. Its surface is cool, and its color is warm beneath the soft glow. Unlike the broad wooden key of an ancient storeroom, this one can be carried easily. It may rest in a pouch, hang from a belt, or sit close against a finger. In the Greek and Roman worlds, locks and keys appeared in many forms. There was no single Greek lock, and no single Roman mechanism. Different regions, workshops, buildings, and periods used different arrangements. Ancient Greek systems included bars, bolts, lifting devices, and large curved or hook-like keys. Some keys may have reached through an opening to move a fastening on the other side of a door. Others worked with mechanisms that lifted or released internal parts. Literary descriptions, including scenes in Homeric poetry, connect keys with storerooms and valued household goods. Such passages help us understand the social meaning of keys, though poetry should not be treated as a precise engineering drawing. It gives us an image of use rather than a complete mechanical plan. A key in such a scene could suggest care of provisions, textiles, containers, or treasured objects. It might belong not merely to an owner, but to the person responsible for a particular room or duty. Greek keys could be large and visually distinctive. Some curved examples are unlike the compact keys familiar today. Their shapes remind us that a key is defined by what it does, not by whether it resembles the small-toothed object in a modern pocket. As Roman metalworking developed across a wide territory, craftspeople produced keys in iron and bronze. Bronze is an alloy made chiefly from copper and tin. It can be cast into detailed forms and polished to a soft gleam. Iron offered strength and became common for practical fittings, although surviving iron objects are often changed by corrosion. Roman locks included sliding bolts, warded rotary mechanisms, tumbler systems, locks for chests and boxes, and locks fitted to doors. There were also portable, padlock-like devices. The phrase padlock-like is useful because these objects were removable locks, but their construction did not necessarily match a modern padlock. A portable lock could secure a container, chain, or fastening without being permanently built into a door. This made it useful for goods that traveled or for objects stored in changing places. Warded rotary locks also became part of the Roman mechanical world. Wards are fixed obstructions inside a lock. A suitable key must have the proper spaces or cutouts to pass them. Once it has cleared those obstructions, it can turn and move the locking part. This basic warded principle would remain important for many centuries. Roman keys survive in a wide range of sizes. Some are substantial door keys, others are delicate, suited to boxes, cabinets, or small containers. Their forms vary, yet many include features still recognizable on traditional keys. The part held by the fingers is called the bow. From the bow extends a stem, and at the working end is the shaped portion that acts within the lock. A Roman key might have a simple loop for its bow, or a more decorative form showing the maker's skill. Among the most intriguing Roman objects are ring keys. These were fashioned so that the key formed part of a finger ring. Some may have operated small boxes or cabinets. Others may have carried a symbolic or decorative purpose. For many surviving examples, the exact use is uncertain. A functional ring key offered an obvious convenience. It stayed close to the hand and was harder to misplace than a loose key. It may also have signaled household responsibility, authority, or status. To wear the key was to show, perhaps quietly, that one had care of something important. Yet we should not assume that every ring-shaped key opened a lock, or that every wearer held the same social role. Ancient objects can outlive the explanations that once surrounded them. A small bronze ring in a museum case may preserve its form while leaving its personal story behind. Nor should we imagine that every Roman carried keys or lived behind a sophisticated locked door. Locks were distributed unevenly. Wealth, occupation, location, and need shaped who used them. Many people still relied on latches, bars, household presence, guarded spaces, and community knowledge. Metalworking and long-distance trade helped recognizable lock and key forms travel across the Roman world. A craft idea developed in one region could be adapted elsewhere. Military sites, towns, villas, workshops, warehouses, and trading centers all created settings in which controlled access was useful. Still, This was not a simple march from wooden mechanisms to metal perfection. Wooden bars continued to work. Seals continued to reveal disturbance. Metal locks overlapped with simpler fastenings, just as they still do. A chest, for example, might have a metal lock, but depend equally on its wooden construction, iron bands, hinges, location, and the presence of people nearby. A lock on a weak lid offered limited protection. A modest fastening on a chest, kept within a guarded room, might serve very well. Imagine one such chest in a stone-walled room. The lid lowers over folded cloth, written tablets, or household records. The hinges move slowly. A small key enters the lock. An iron turns within wood. The bolt settles. Elsewhere, a ring key rests against a finger. Farther down the corridor, heavier keys hang from a belt. Each belongs to a particular scale of life, from a private box to a substantial door. After the Western Roman world changed, these practices did not simply vanish. Locks remained in use, while forms, workshops, and institutions changed around them. In medieval towns, monasteries, churches, homes, and castles, keys became closely connected with storage, office, and entrusted responsibility. The bronze key fades from lamplight. In its place, we hear the subdued echo of footsteps in a stone passage and the gentle weight of an iron key ring carried through a cloister. Chapter 4: Locks Behind Medieval Doors. At the end of the day, a wooden bar is lowered across a gate. It settles into place with a deep, restrained sound. Beyond it, the passage grows quiet. Inside, an oak door moves on iron hinges. A chest rests beneath a woolen covering. Somewhere in a nearby corridor, several keys touch softly against one another as their keeper walks through the evening stillness. The medieval period covers roughly 1,000 years and many regions. There was no single medieval way to secure a building or container. Practices differed from one century to another, from town to countryside, and from one institution to the next. Yet some broad patterns are clear. Security usually depended on overlapping layers. There were door bars and latches. There were warded locks. Chests and cupboards could be locked. Town gates might be watched by gatekeepers. Monasteries, estates, and large households relied on servants, officials, guards, and routines. Community oversight remained as important as metalwork. Locks appeared on castles, town gates, monasteries, churches, storehouses, strong rooms, chests, cupboards, and some domestic doors. A strong room was a reinforced room used for valuables or records. A storehouse was a place where supplies could be kept in an organized and protected way. The chest held a particularly important place in medieval life. Movable wealth can be stored inside it. Coins, documents, household records, textiles, tools, and other valued goods could all be gathered under one lid. A chest could be placed within a room that was itself controlled. Its lock was therefore only one layer. The chest's weight, iron fittings, hinges, location, and the people responsible for it all contributed to its practical security. Metal locks required skill and labor. Iron had to be shaped, pierced, filed, and fitted. For many people, a carefully made lock was costly. Simpler wooden fastenings and plain bars remained common and useful. This is important to remember when looking at surviving medieval keys in museums or old buildings. The objects that endure are not necessarily a complete sample of everyday life. Fine metalwork is more likely to survive and be preserved than an ordinary wooden latch. Locks on important buildings could be substantial and decorative. Locks in modest settings might be plain. Some household doors may have had simple fastenings rather than keyed locks. The presence or absence of a key depended on need, resources, and custom. In large institutions, key holding could be connected with office rather than personal ownership. A steward might be entrusted with property or provisions. A cellarer could oversee food and drink. A sacristan might care for objects and spaces used in worship. A gatekeeper controlled an entrance. The key represented the duty attached to the role. When the office passed to another person, the key could pass with it. Some institutions divided responsibility among several people. A room or chest might have multiple locks, with different keys held by different officials. No single person could open it alone. The arrangement made access a shared act. Such systems varied widely, and not every monastery, church, town, or estate used them. Still, they show how a lock could embody a rule of cooperation. The mechanism did not merely distinguish between a correct and incorrect key. It also expressed how authority had been organized. Medieval iron keys developed the familiar parts seen in many later European examples. The bow is the part held by the fingers. It may be a plain loop, a rounded shape, or an ornamental design. The shank is the stem extending from the bow. At the far end is the bit, the shaped working portion that meets the interior of the lock. These three parts create the silhouette many people now associate with an old key: a broad bow, a long shank, a complex bit at the end. The key might hang from a ring, a cord, or a belt. Its weight could be reassuringly present. Its surface might show small marks from the file that shaped it, and smoother areas where years of handling polished the iron. Behind the door, the lock itself worked with a bolt. Turning the key moved or released the bolt, allowing the door or lid to open. In a warded lock, fixed metal pieces restricted which key shape could turn successfully. Yet the lock's usefulness depended on everything around it. A strong lock on a poorly fitted door could not provide complete protection. Hinges, frame, wall, and installation all mattered. So did the handling of the key. If a key was lost, copied, borrowed without permission, or left unattended, the mechanism could no longer distinguish as intended. The lock tested possession of the object. It did not know the character or motives of the person holding it. This limitation is not unique to medieval locks. It remains true of many access systems today. Still, within their setting, locks served practical and meaningful purposes. They organized supplies, they protected records, they marked the boundary between public and restricted spaces. They helped institutions assign responsibility. At dusk, a gate bar could be lowered as part of the day's routine. In a monastery, keys might be returned to a designated keeper. In a household, a chest could be closed before the room grew dark. These actions need not have felt dramatic. They were part of ordinary care. Imagine the key ring moving through a quiet cloister. The last light rests on the stone. A door closes, iron meets oak, and the bolt travels into place. The person carrying the keys continues onward, not as the owner of every room, but as someone temporarily entrusted with them. Among the mechanisms behind those doors, the warded lock became especially enduring. Inside it waited a small landscape of fixed metal shapes, and the proper key had to find a clear path among them. We can follow that path now slowly as a long iron shank enters a deep keyhole and begins its measured turn. Chapter 5: The Age of the Warded Lock. A long iron key enters a deep keyhole. The door around it is made of warm, polished wood, darkened by age and many hands. The key's broad bow rests between the fingers. Its shank disappears into the lock. Inside, fixed pieces of metal wait in silence. These are the wards. A warded lock contains instructions that restrict the movement of an unsuitable key. A properly shaped key has slots and cutouts that pass around those obstructions. Once the key has found a clear path, it can turn and move the bolt. The idea is easier to picture as a little pathway inside the lock. The wards form the boundaries of that path. The key's bit has been shaped to travel through the available spaces. If the bit meets a ward, it cannot complete its turn. If its shape matches the arrangement it passes by, then the bolt moves with a low metallic murmur. Warded mechanisms have ancient roots. Roman craftspeople used warded rotary locks, and the principle remained common through medieval and early modern Europe. It survived because it was understandable, durable, and suitable for many doors, cupboards, chests, and gates. The key shapes could become elaborate. Each slot or opening in the bit might correspond to part of the internal arrangement. The complex bit created the appearance of a small iron pattern, carefully cut and filed. Many of the large decorative keys associated with old European doors are warded keys. Their long shanks reached into deep locks. Their broad bows gave the hand leverage for turning. Their working ends can be pierced with openings or shaped into steps and projections. The outer form of the key was sometimes graceful enough to be admired in its own right. Bows might be formed into loops, leaves, geometric patterns, or balanced curves. A lock plate, the metal plate covering or supporting a lock, might also be decorated, yet decoration and security are different things. An ornate bow does not necessarily improve the mechanism. Engraving does not make the bolt stronger. A beautiful lock plate may show the taste of a patron and the skill of a metalworker while concealing a relatively simple interior. This does not lessen the value of the craft. It simply reminds us that a lock can serve several purposes at once. It can control movement, fit the architecture around it, and contribute to the appearance of a room or building. Warded locks were suitable for their historical settings, but they had limits. Fixed wards control the shape of the path through the lock. They do not offer the same range of key differences as a finely made lever lock or pin tumbler mechanism. A key difference is one distinct key pattern within a family of locks. The more internal positions a mechanism can distinguish, the more different keys it may support. The warded lock makes distinctions mainly through fixed obstructions, especially when combined with a sturdy door and careful key control. But the possible variations are constrained by the need for a key to pass through and turn. The term skeleton key belongs to this part of the story, though it is often used too broadly. A skeleton key generally means a simplified or reduced key designed to pass the wards in more than one simple lock. Not every antique key is a skeleton key. A large old key with an elaborate bit may have been made for one particular warded lock. Its age and appearance do not automatically place it in the skeleton category. As towns and cities grew, locksmithing became an increasingly recognized craft. Guilds and other regulated craft associations developed in many European cities. Their rules differed by place and period. A guild might oversee apprenticeship, standards of work, entry into the trade, and relations among craftspeople. It could help define who was permitted to sell certain kinds of metalwork within a town, but guild structures were not universal, and they changed over time. The locksmith's work required a blend of strength and patience. Iron had to be heated and shaped, then refined with smaller tools. Wards needed to be placed so that the intended key could move cleanly. The bolt had to travel without binding. Springs, where used, needed to flex and return. The key and lock were fitted as a pair. Small adjustments mattered. A cut made too narrow might catch. A part left too loose might rattle or fail to guide the motion correctly. Years of use softened the finished object. File marks became less sharp beneath repeated touch. The bow grew smooth where fingers turned it. The keyhole plate acquired faint scratches around its opening. These signs of wear tell a quiet story. A lock may be designed in a workshop, but its later life unfolds through habit. Morning opening, evening closing, a cupboard visited for supplies, a gate secured after the last arrival. Old and new mechanisms continued side by side. Warded locks did not erase bars or latches. Later lever locks did not immediately erase warded forms. Even today, simple warded locks remain in use in some settings. The history of locks is not a staircase where each new design makes the previous step disappear. It is more like a room, gradually filling with different tools. Some are chosen for cost, some for convenience, some for strength, appearance, tradition, or familiarity. The warded key remains one of the most recognizable objects in that room. We can feel its weight for a moment. Dark iron against the palm, a broad bow beneath the fingers, a long shank entering the door. The bit passes through the fixed interior shapes, and the turn is completed. The bolt settles. The graceful outline of the key reminds us that locks were never only invisible mechanisms. They were made objects, heated, hammered, filed, adjusted, and sometimes ornamented with remarkable care. To understand them more fully, we can step into the workshop where the bellows breathes beside a low charcoal glow, and where the patient rhythm of a small hammer begins. Chapter 6. Locksmiths, Craft, and Decorative Metalwork. The forge is warm, but the workshop around it is calm. Bellows breathe air into a low charcoal glow. Iron filings gather in soft gray curls on a wooden bench. The small hammer taps in a patient rhythm, then stops. For much of the history of locks, mechanisms were made and fitted largely by hand. This did not always mean that one person made every part. Workshops could include masters, trained workers, apprentices, assistants, specialized tools, and divisions of labor. Water-powered equipment and organized production existed before modern factories. Still, each lock required a great deal of close attention. The process often began at the forge, a hearth or workshop, where metal was heated for shaping. The bellows pushed air into the fire, raising its heat. Iron changed color in the glow and became more responsive beneath the hammer. On an anvil, a heavy metal block used as a working surface, the hot iron could be flattened, curved, drawn out, or folded. Larger shapes emerged first: a plate, a bolt, a piece that would become a key. After the metal cooled, finer work began. Chisels cut edges and openings, punches made holes, drills enlarged them, files smoothed surfaces and brought parts toward their final dimensions. A file does not remove much metal at once. Its progress is gradual. Stroke by stroke, a rough edge becomes true. A slot becomes wide enough. A key bit gains the shape needed to pass the wards. Inside the lock, bolts, wards, springs, covers, and other pieces had to be fitted together. A spring is a flexible part that returns toward its original position after being pressed or bent. In a lock, it may guide a lever, latch, or other moving component back to rest. Reliable movement depended on balance. Parts had to move freely, but not with excessive looseness. A bolt that fitted too tightly might bind when the weather changed or the door shifted. A piece left too loose could move unpredictably. The locksmith tested, adjusted, and tested again. The key entered, it turned, the bolt traveled, the spring flexed and returned. If the movement was not smooth, the lock went back to the bench. Locksmiths worked within a broader metalworking world. Their skills could overlap with those of blacksmiths, clockmakers, gunsmiths, and instrument makers. Each craft handled metal at different scales and for different purposes, but many shared tools, materials, and knowledge of movement. A clockmaker might focus on delicate wheels and measured time. A blacksmith might shape larger architectural fittings. A locksmith worked between these scales, making an object strong enough to control a door, yet precise enough to respond to one key. Workshops varied greatly. Some were small, others were part of larger systems of production. Working conditions, reputation, specialization, and income differed from place to place. It would be misleading to imagine every locksmith as a solitary master, quietly creating a single masterpiece. Yet some locks truly were made as demonstrations of exceptional skill. In certain European craft traditions, an apprentice or journeyman might be required to produce a demanding work to show readiness for a higher standing. A journeyman was a trained craft worker who had completed an apprenticeship, but was not necessarily recognized as a master. The demonstration piece is often called a masterpiece. Requirements differed by guild and period, and not every town demanded one. Where the practice existed, a complex lock could display many abilities at once: forging, filing, fitting, spring making, decoration, and mechanical planning. Fine locks appeared on church doors, civic buildings, estate gates, cabinets, presentation chests, and important rooms. Their outward surfaces could become part of the architecture. A decorative lock plate might spread across a wooden door in a symmetrical pattern. Iron tendrils could resemble leaves or flowers. Geometric lines might frame the keyhole. The visible plate concealed much of the mechanism while presenting a composed face to the room. On a cabinet, the lock might be smaller but equally refined. A polished key turned within carefully fitted metal. On a city gate, the scale could be much larger, with heavy bolts linked to a mechanism built to withstand years of use. Ornament did not necessarily mean greater mechanical sophistication. A plain lock could be exceptionally well engineered. A richly decorated one could contain a familiar warded arrangement. Appearance and operation followed different purposes, even when made by the same hands. The best work brought them into harmony. Imagine the workshop late in the day. The forge has dimmed. Heated metal cools on a safe surface. Tools lie in familiar places. The newly fitted lock rests on the bench, with its cover removed, revealing the small interior landscape. The locksmith turns the key slowly. A ward clears the bit. A spring bends. The bolt slides. There is no need for speed. The maker listens to the sound and feels the resistance through the bow of the key. A slight catch can be sensed before it can be seen. The lock is opened again, adjusted, and retested. Such patient fitting helped create mechanisms suited to their particular doors and containers. It also created a challenge. Handmade parts could vary, and replacing a lost key or damaged component might require new fitting by a skilled worker. Over time, makers sought greater consistency. Better tools allowed smaller parts and closer control over shape. Trade and urban growth increased demand. Banks, merchants, government offices, postal systems, and expanding cities all had rooms, cabinets, packets, and records to protect. The quiet workshop did not disappear, but the questions asked within it began to change. Could a lock distinguish among more keys? Could its parts be made with greater precision? Could its reliability be demonstrated publicly? In the 18th century, Inventors increasingly answered those questions with patents, advertisements, and carefully arranged mechanisms. On a merchant's desk, account books and sealed letters waited beside a locked cabinet. Inside the lock, a new kind of movable part was ready to rise. Chapter 7. New Challenges in the 18th Century. A merchant's office rests above a narrow city street. Account books lie closed on a desk. Sealed packets are arranged beside a brass instrument and an inkstand. A cabinet door meets its frame, and a key turns with a restrained click. Outside, commerce moves through streets, ports, roads, and postal routes. Goods travel farther. Records multiply. Banking, insurance, government administration, and long-distance trade place increasing value on dependable storage and controlled access. The 18th century did not bring one sudden transformation. Older bars, warded locks, guarded rooms, and sealed containers continued in use. But the demand for finer mechanisms grew. Improved metalworking allowed smaller components to be made with more consistent shapes. Production was not yet uniformly mechanized. Workshops still depended heavily on fitting by skilled hands. Yet tools and methods were becoming capable of closer precision. Precision means close control over size, shape, and movement. In a lock, a small difference can determine whether a component rises freely, catches, or stops the bolt. Lockmaking also became more public. Makers advertised the quality of their work. Patents recorded legal claims connected to inventions. Demonstrations and challenges invited attention. A patent grants a temporary legal right related to an invention. It documents a claim at a particular time, but it does not always prove that every underlying idea appeared for the very first time on that date. Inventors often build on earlier craft knowledge, familiar principles, and the work of many unnamed people. One important documented step came in Britain in 1778, when Robert Barron patented a double-acting lever lock. A lever lock uses one or more movable levers inside the mechanism. The key lifts them. Each lever must reach a suitable height before the bolt is allowed to move. We can picture a single lever as a small metal piece resting under light spring pressure. The key turns beneath it. A shaped part of the key raises the lever toward a required position. With several levers, each may need a different lift. The key's shape provides those different heights. When all are positioned suitably, the bolt has a clear path. The phrase double-acting described an important refinement. It was not enough simply to push a lever upward without limit. The lever had to be raised within a controlled range. Too little would not release the mechanism, too much would also prevent proper movement. The lock therefore asked a more exact question of the key. Not merely can you lift the lever, but can you lift it to the proper place? This gave lever mechanisms the potential for more key differences than a basic warded lock. Different keys could be shaped to raise their sets of levers to different heights. The lock remained mechanical and understandable. Its shaped surface met the levers. The levers rose. When their positions agreed, the bolt traveled. Yet inside that calm sequence was a growing emphasis on controlled tolerances. The space within which a lever could rest had to be defined carefully. The key had to be cut with corresponding care. Springs had to apply useful pressure without making the action too stiff. Such refinement depended on more than the inventor named in a patent. It depended on metal suppliers, tool makers, workshop labor, practical testing, and the accumulated judgment of craftspeople. It also depended on the needs of customers. Merchants wanted to secure account books and goods. Banks and government offices managed money and records. Postal systems carried sealed packets. Domestic users wanted reliable locks for doors, cabinets, and chests. Military and institutional settings created further demand. Banking was one part of this change, not the whole of it. As makers competed for attention, public demonstrations became useful. A lock could be displayed as evidence of workmanship. A challenge might invite experts to test a claim under stated conditions. These events were partly engineering trials and partly advertising. A dramatic claim could attract customers. A successful demonstration could strengthen a maker's reputation. The public performance of security became part of the lock's commercial life. Still, no demonstration could prove that a mechanism would remain beyond all future tools and knowledge. A lock could be highly resistant in one era and better understood in another. Materials changed, measuring tools improved, specialists learned from earlier designs. The sensible goal was not absolute perfection. It was dependable performance within a real setting. That setting included the door, frame, hinges, installation, and habits of the key holders. A fine lever lock fitted badly to weak wood could not achieve what its mechanism promised. A carefully installed lock could be undermined by careless control of keys. Security remained an arrangement rather than a single object. In the quiet office, the cabinet is closed for the evening. The key lifts hidden levers to their proper resting places, then turns the bolt. Papers and sealed packets remain within. On the street below, a locksmith's sign hangs above a workshop door. Inside, brass and iron samples rest on a bench. Inventors and makers continue experimenting with sliders, wafers, levers, and springs. The search for more closely controlled movement would continue into the next century. Two British names, Joseph Bramah and Jeremiah Chubb, became closely associated with that search. Their locks would be displayed not merely as useful hardware, but as objects of confidence, precision, and public reputation. Chapter 8. Bramah, Chubb, and the Search for Security. A tubular key is seated carefully in a polished lock. Around it, brass and steel parts wait in measured stillness. The key does not resemble the long iron key of a warded door. Its form belongs to a different mechanical arrangement. Joseph Bramah patented his influential lock in Britain in 1784. The mechanism used a tubular key and a set of internal sliders, sometimes described as wafers. A wafer or slider is a thin movable part that must reach a correct position. In the Bramah lock, several such pieces had to be moved to precise positions before the mechanism could turn. The important idea was controlled alignment. Each slider responded to the key. When the sliders were arranged as required, the turning parts were released. This demanded fine workmanship. The components needed to move smoothly, yet their permitted positions had to remain exact enough for the lock to distinguish between keys. Bramah's lock became famous for its precision and for its resistance to the opening methods known in its time. It was not merely sold, it was displayed. A challenge lock was placed before the public, and a reward was offered to anyone who could open it under stated conditions. The display joined engineering with advertising. The lock became both a mechanism and a visible claim. For many years, that claim carried great prestige. During the Great Exhibition era in 1851, the American locksmith Alfred Charles Hobbs eventually opened Bramah's challenge lock after prolonged expert work. Contemporary accounts commonly report roughly 51 working hours spread across more than 2 weeks. There's no need to follow the operational details. What matters is the lesson. The opening did not make the Bramah lock worthless. It remained an extraordinary piece of engineering and workmanship. The event showed that claims of complete invulnerability change as tools, skill, and knowledge change. A lock can be highly resistant without being perfect. Indeed, no practical lock should be described as unopenable under every imaginable condition. Security is always connected to time, effort, circumstances, and the wider structure around the mechanism. A device that demands unusual expertise and prolonged work may still serve its purpose very well. Bramah's achievements also rested on more than a single inventive mind. Workshop labor, manufacturing skill, improved metallurgy, and the work of many craftspeople supported the finished design. A few decades after Bramah's patent, another important British mechanism gained attention. In 1818, Jeremiah Chubb patented his detector lock. It was a lever lock designed to register certain kinds of improper disturbance. The word detector may sound broader than the actual mechanism. The lock did not identify every possible form of interference. It responded to particular disturbances of its internal parts. If triggered, the mechanism could enter a blocked state. This indicated that the lock required attention and a reset procedure before normal use could continue. In this way, the lock did more than resist movement. Under certain conditions, it also signaled that something unusual had happened. The idea has a distant resemblance to ancient tamper-evident seals, though the methods are very different. A broken clay seal showed visible disturbance. The detector lock registered particular disturbance within a metal mechanism. Both reflected the value of knowing that an access boundary had been tested. Jeremiah Chubb and his brother Charles became associated with the Chubb lock-making firm. Their work gained attention during a period when government and commercial institutions were actively interested in stronger and more dependable locks. As with Brahma, the reputation of the Chubb lock depended on precision. Levers needed to rise to controlled heights. Springs needed to return them. The bolt had to remain blocked unless the mechanism reached the intended state. Imagine the motion at a gentle pace. The key enters. Its shaped surface begins to turn beneath the levers. One lever rises, then another. Each approaches its measured position. When the internal arrangement is correct, the bolt is permitted to move. If certain parts are disturbed in the wrong way, the detector feature responds and the mechanism requires attention. This is enough to understand the design without turning the history into a lesson in defeating it. The stories of Brahma and Chubb also reveal how lock-making had become part of public culture. Showrooms displayed mechanisms as objects of confidence. Patents connected invention with legal and commercial identity. Challenges allowed claims to be tested and discussed, yet every lock remained part of a larger system. A precise mechanism needed a strong case, careful installation, a suitable door, and responsible key management. The finest internal parts could not repair a weak frame or prevent an authorized key from being misused. This wider view keeps the story balanced. Lock history is not a contest to find one perfect design. It is a continuing effort to match mechanisms to needs. Brahma used sliders moved to exact positions. Chubb refined lever locking and added a form of internal indication. Other makers pursued combinations, pin systems, and new manufacturing methods. Old forms remained beside them. Warded locks continued in ordinary service. Bars still crossed gates. Simple latches closed garden doors and cupboards. New invention added choices rather than erasing the past. In the showroom, the polished challenge lock rests behind glass. Its surface reflects the quiet room. In a nearby workshop, a lever returns beneath the pressure of its spring. Across the Atlantic, another family of lock makers is working with pins. Their designs will help compress an ancient mechanical idea into a small metal cylinder, operated by the familiar flat key that so often rests in a pocket today. Chapter 9. Linus Yale and the Modern Pin Tumbler. A flat metal key rests in the palm. It is small, light, and familiar. Along one edge is a row of cuts at different depths. These cuts are sometimes called the key's bitting, the pattern that gives the key its working shape. Ahead is a narrow keyway, the shaped opening into which the key slides. The key enters gently. Hidden pins begin to rise. The modern cylinder pin tumbler lock is closely associated with Linus Yale Sr. and his son, Linus Yale Jr. During the 19th century in the United States, Yale Sr. developed and patented locks, including pin-based mechanisms for banks and safes. Yale Jr. continued and refined this work. During the 1860s, he patented important compact cylinder pin tumbler designs. These helped establish a form now familiar on countless doors. Its parts are small, but the principle can be understood slowly. At the center is a rotating inner piece called the plug. The plug sits inside an outer housing. Together they form the cylinder assembly. A narrow keyway runs into the plug. Above it are chambers containing pairs of pins. Each pair is a pin stack. Small springs press downward from above. Without the correct key, some of the pins cross the boundary between the plug and the outer housing. That boundary is called the shear line. Because pins extend across the shear line, the plug cannot rotate. The pins hold the two parts together. Now the key slides into the keyway. Its different cuts meet the lower pins. A shallow cut raises one pin stack by one amount. A deeper cut raises another by a different amount. The small pins rise in quiet sequence. Above them, tiny springs compress. With the correct key fully inserted, the boundaries between the pin pairs align at the shear line. No pin crosses from the plug into the housing. The plug is now free to turn. That rotation operates the locking mechanism, moving or releasing a bolt or latch. The precise connection differs among lock designs, but the essential sequence remains calm and clear. The key enters, the pins rise, their boundaries align, the plug turns, the bolt or latch responds. This arrangement allows many possible key combinations within a compact mechanism. Different patterns of cuts lift the pin stacks to different heights. Only the intended pattern places all the pin boundaries at the shear line at once. The ancient wooden pin lock comes naturally to mind. In both systems, movable pins prevent motion until they are raised to suitable positions. In both, the key supplies different lifting heights. Yet the modern cylinder is not simply the ancient lock made smaller. The materials, geometry, springs, manufacturing methods, and type of movement are very different. The ancient lock released a large sliding wooden bolt by lifting wooden pins. The Yale-style mechanism allows a metal plug to rotate after spring-loaded pin pairs align. The relationship is best understood as a conceptual resemblance and as an acknowledged inspiration in the history of the design, rather than an unchanged technological line passing directly through every intervening century. Yale Jr. and Henry Town established the business that became Yale and Town in 1868. The company became part of the growing industrial world in which locks could be manufactured with increasing consistency and distributed widely. The compact flat key suited this world. It was easier to carry than a long, warded key. Its cuts could be produced in many patterns. The cylinder could be fitted into a range of doors and hardware. Still, pin tumbler locks did not replace every other mechanism. Lever locks remained important, especially in many safes and in European door lock traditions. Warded locks, combination locks, padlocks, bars, and latches continued to serve their own purposes. Even within the category of pin tumbler locks, quality varies greatly. Materials, manufacturing tolerances, installation, key control, and protective features all matter. Two locks based on the same general principle may perform very differently. Tolerance refers to the permitted variation in the size and fit of components. If parts are made too loosely, the mechanism may be less consistent. If made without enough clearance, it may bind. Good manufacturing balances precision with dependable movement. The key itself also becomes part of a management system. Who receives one? Can it be copied? Is it returned when no longer needed? Is a lost key noticed and addressed? The lock recognizes the shape presented to it. It does not recognize the personal identity of the holder. For the moment, though, we can remain with the mechanism itself. The flat key is fully inserted. The cuts rest beneath the pins. Each small stack has risen by its required amount. At the shear line, the pieces agree. The fingers turn the key. The plug rotates smoothly, and the latch draws back from the frame. When the key is removed, the springs press the pins downward again. Some cross the shear line, and the plug is held still. It is a compact conversation between shape and movement, repeated quietly on doors around the world. As factories expanded, such locks and keys could be produced in larger numbers. Components became more consistent. Offices, hotels, railways, apartment buildings, post boxes, filing cabinets, bicycles, and automobiles all created new uses for controlled access. The key was becoming an ordinary companion. It settled into coat pockets, hung from numbered hooks, and waited in cabinets at the beginning of a shift. We can follow it there now into the routines of an industrial world. Chapter 10. Locks in an Industrial World. A hotel key hangs from a numbered hook behind a desk. Nearby, several smaller keys rest in a shallow drawer. In a railway office, a clerk opens a cabinet at the beginning of a shift. Elsewhere, a bicycle padlock closes with a modest click. Industrial production changed the scale on which locks and keys could be made. Machine tools, standardized gauges, divided factory labor, and increasingly interchangeable components allowed many locks to become more consistent in size. They could be produced in larger numbers and often at lower cost relative to individually fitted examples. Standardization means making objects according to repeatable or agreed dimensions. A gauge allows a worker to compare a part with a required size or shape. These practices help manufacturers create locks that could be installed, repaired, and reproduced more predictably. Interchangeable parts are components made consistently enough to replace one another within a system. The term does not mean that a part from any maker will fit every other maker's product. Interchangeability usually exists within a defined design, product line, or manufacturing standard. The change was gradual. Countries, companies, and types of hardware developed at different rates. Some factory-made locks were excellent, others were modest. Mass production could improve consistency, but it did not automatically guarantee quality. Hand fitting also continued. Machine work and craft knowledge often operated together. As cities and institutions grew, locks spread through factories, offices, apartments, hotels, railways, warehouses, postboxes, filing cabinets, and lockers. Each setting created its own routines. An office might issue keys to designated employees. A railway could control cabinets, storage rooms, and equipment spaces. A warehouse might manage gates and interior rooms. Apartment residents carried keys for shared entrances and private doors. Institutions with many rooms needed ways to organize their keys. Key cabinets provided rows of numbered hooks. Written records noted which person had received a key and when it was returned. The arrangement was simple but important. A lock could control a door only if the institution also controlled the keys intended to open it. In hotels, keys became part of the relationship between guest, room, and staff. Practices changed over time, and modern reception routines should not be projected onto every 19th century hotel. Still, numbered keys and organized storage offered a practical way to manage many rooms. Master key systems added another layer. A master key is authorized to open more than one lock within a planned group. Individual keys open fewer doors, perhaps only one room or a limited set. The master key allows designated staff to reach several spaces without carrying a separate key for each. But it introduces trade-offs. More relationships between keys and locks can make key control and maintenance more complicated. The loss of a broadly authorized key may affect many doors. A well-planned system balances access with responsibility. Padlocks also became widely available. A padlock is a detachable lock, often made with a shackle. The shackle is the curved or straight fastening loop that passes through a hasp, chain, ring, or other fitting. Mass-produced padlocks served dates, luggage, lockers, bicycles, and industrial uses. They could be carried to the object being secured rather than permanently fitted into a door. Imagine a bicycle leaned against a railing. The shackle passes through a fastening point. It closes with a quiet click. The key joins several others in a coat pocket. That small collection of keys becomes a feature of modern routine. One for a home, one for an office, perhaps another for a cabinet, locker, gate, or bicycle. The sound of several keys touching in a pocket would have been less familiar in earlier centuries, when costly metal locks were less evenly distributed. Industrial production made keyed access part of everyday life for a much wider range of people. Automobiles added further keys, they not all at once. Early cars did not share one standard system. Door locks, ignition controls, and keys developed in stages. During the 20th century, ignition and door keys became increasingly familiar, sometimes as separate keys and later often combined in different ways. The automobile key carried permission beyond a fixed room. It authorized the use of a movable machine. Combination locks also continued to spread, especially on safes, vaults, lockers, luggage, and bicycles. Lever locks remained important. Warded locks persisted. Pin tumbler cylinders became common. Old and new mechanisms worked side by side. This coexistence is one of the central truths of lock history. A factory may use pin tumbler door locks, lever mechanisms on secure cabinets, combination locks on safes, and padlocks on gates. A home may contain a modern cylinder at the entrance and a simple warded lock on an old interior cupboard. No mechanism wins a final contest. Each is selected for a purpose, cost, habit, and setting. The industrial world also made replacement and duplication more routine. Keys could be cut according to established patterns. Locks could be ordered in groups. Hardware catalogs allowed customers to choose among standardized products. Yet each convenience brought a need for management. Duplicate keys had to be tracked. Worn locks needed maintenance. Changes in staff or occupancy required decisions about who should retain access. The human habits surrounding locks became more organized because the number of locks had grown. At the end of the day, the railway clerk returns a key to its numbered hook. A hotel key waits behind the desk. A filing cabinet closes over papers. A bicycle padlock rests around cool metal. The keys settle together in a pocket. As these objects became ordinary companions, some systems began asking a different question. What if permission could be carried not in a shaped piece of metal, but in a remembered sequence, a card, a coded signal, or a stored pattern? The next lock waits behind a dial. Beneath the fingertips, internal wheels begin to turn. Chapter 11. From metal keys to codes and electronics. A dial moves slowly beneath the fingertips. Its numbered face turns one way, pauses, and turns again. Inside the lock, wheels rotate around a common center. Each wheel contains an opening called a gate. When the correct sequence has been entered, the gates align. Another part of the mechanism can then move through them, allowing the lock to release. A combination lock replaces a conventional shaped key with a remembered sequence or setting. The user carries the answer in memory, on paper, or within an authorized procedure rather than on a metal key ring. Mechanical combination mechanisms became influential during the 19th century. In the United States, James Sargent patented an important changeable combination lock in 1857. A changeable combination could be reset according to the lock's design and authorized procedure. This allowed the controlling sequence to be altered without necessarily replacing the whole mechanism. Sargent later developed time locks for vaults. A time lock prevents opening until a set interval has passed, even when the normal combination is known. The mechanism controls not only who has the required information, but also when opening is permitted. Combination locks became familiar on safes, vaults, lockers, luggage, and bicycles. Their forms varied. Some used rotary dials and wheels, others used buttons or aligned number rings. Like keyed locks, they depended on design, materials, installation, and careful management of the credential. In this case, the credential was the sequence. During the 20th century, access systems increasingly used cards and electronics. Some early systems relied on punched or specially patterned cards. Later systems used magnetic stripes, electronic key cards, numeric codes, radio frequency badges, and small fobs. A credential is something a system accepts as evidence of authorization. It may be an object, a code, a measured characteristic, or digital information. In a hotel, a recodable electronic lock offers a practical advantage. Access can be changed for a new guest without replacing a metal cylinder. The system assigns a new credential, and an earlier one can cease to be accepted. The card passes through or near a reader. A quiet tone sounds. A small indicator changes from red to green. Behind the electronics, a familiar mechanical action often remains. The system decides whether the latch or bolt may move. Once permission is granted, metal still slides against metal, much as it has for centuries. Electronic systems can manage permissions by person, place, and time. A credential may work only on selected doors or during selected hours. Some systems also record access events. Such records have limits. A log may show that a credential was used, but not always which human being actually presented it. Credentials can be shared, borrowed, or misplaced. Modern security still depends on habits. Vehicles introduced another form of electronic access. Remote car fobs send coded radio signals for locking and unlocking. Many cars also use an immobilizer transponder. The transponder receives a signal and sends a coded response. In an immobilizer system, the vehicle must recognize the authorized response before the engine can operate. Later smart key systems can recognize an authorized device nearby. Their exact operation differs among manufacturers. Many systems use rolling or changing codes, making the simple reuse of a captured signal more difficult. The driver may no longer insert a metal key into the door or ignition, yet a credential is still being presented. The lock asks a question by radio, and the device supplies a coded answer. Biometric systems ask a different kind of question. Biometric means based on measured human characteristics. A system may assess a fingerprint, face, iris, or voice. During enrollment, it creates a processed reference pattern called a template. When a person later presents a new reading, the system compares it with the enrolled template. The comparison is probabilistic. It estimates whether the new reading is sufficiently similar. This is not the same as perfect recognition. Biometric systems can make errors. They may accept an incorrect match or reject an authorized person. Lighting, position, injury, aging, environmental conditions, and sensor quality can all affect readings. Backup procedures remain important. Biometric systems also raise questions about privacy and the handling of sensitive data. Storage methods vary, and systems do not all store information in the same form. A smartphone may carry another kind of credential, a digital or cryptographic key. A cryptographic key is data used in mathematical security operations. It need not resemble a physical key. It may help authorize a device, protect communication, or prove that a valid credential is present. Phones can carry digital access for homes, offices, hotels, and vehicles. The visible action may be as small as bringing a device near a reader, yet the underlying purpose is ancient. The system must decide whether to allow movement or use. Electronic does not automatically mean more secure than mechanical. Design, installation, software, credential management, network protection, maintenance, and backup plans all matter. A digital system can be well designed or poorly designed, just as a metal lock can be strong or weak. Physical keys remain common because they are durable, understandable, relatively inexpensive, and able to work without electrical power. Mechanical combinations, cards, fobs, biometrics, phones, and metal keys therefore coexist. A modern building may use electronic badges at the entrance, a metal key for a cabinet, a combination on a safe, and a simple latch on an interior door. The history remains layered. The card reader gives a quiet tone, the indicator changes color, electronics grant permission, and a metal bolt slides in the old familiar way. Whether the credential is a wooden key, a flat metal key, a remembered sequence, a card, a measured pattern, or information held by a phone, someone has been entrusted with the means to enter. That brings us to the wider meaning of the key, an object that has long represented not only access, but also responsibility, authority, care, and welcome. Chapter 12. The Quiet Meaning of a Key. An old iron key rests on a folded cloth. Its edges have been polished by many hands, the lock at once opened may be gone, and the door may have been replaced long ago, yet the key remains. Perhaps its history is written in a family record. Perhaps it survives through a story passed from one person to another. Such stories can be meaningful, even when every detail cannot be documented. A key often outlives its practical task. Across centuries, keys have represented more than the ability to move a bolt. They have suggested household responsibility, stewardship of supplies, care of records, authority over an office, and trust placed in a person. Stewardship means responsible care of something entrusted to someone. A steward does not necessarily own the place or object. The role is to protect, manage, and use it properly. This idea appeared in the medieval key carried by a cellarer, gatekeeper, sacristan, or official. It appears today when an employee is issued a workplace key, when a caretaker receives access to a building, or when a neighbor is trusted with a spare. The key says in a practical way, you may enter, and you are expected to use that permission with care. Keys have also become ceremonial objects. The ceremonial key to a city recalls times when city walls and gates had direct practical importance. Control of the gate meant control of entry. In later traditions, presenting a city key became an honorary gesture rather than a literal transfer of authority over a working lock. There is no single universal origin or ritual for this practice. Ceremonial traditions vary among places and cultures. Still, the broad symbolism is easy to understand. The recipient is being welcomed and honored through the language of access. Keys appear in religion and heraldry as well. Heraldry is the tradition of coats of arms and related symbols. In Christian art, crossed keys are especially associated with St. Peter and with papal symbolism. Here again, the key stands for authority and entrusted access. Its meaning is shaped by the culture and setting in which it appears. Key symbolism is not always simple or entirely warm. A key may suggest care, privacy, shelter, and welcome. It can also suggest authority, exclusion, or control. To hold a key is to possess permission that others may not have. The meaning depends on the relationship around it. Language has carried the key into many metaphors. A metaphor describes one idea through another, without meaning it literally. We speak of the key to a problem, a key idea, a key person, or the key to understanding. A mat has a key that explains its symbols. In music, a key provides an organizing framework for notes and harmony. These expressions preserve the notion of access. A key makes something available. It reveals a pattern. It allows understanding to move where it could not move before. The metaphor works because the physical action is so familiar. A key enters, something aligns, a barrier gives way, a space becomes reachable. Even digital systems continue this language. A cryptographic key is information, not metal. A phone may hold a digital key for a room or vehicle. Yet the old word remains useful, because the old purpose remains. Authorization means permission to enter, use, or operate something. Every lock in our story has been concerned with authorization, even if the method was simple. A wooden pin lock authorized the person carrying the broad-toothed key. A warded lock accepted a key shaped to pass its fixed obstructions. A lever lock waited for several pieces to rise to suitable heights. A pin tumbler cylinder required its pin boundaries to meet at the shear line. A combination lock accepted a sequence. An electronic reader accepted a card, code, badge, fob, biometric comparison, or digital credential. The materials changed, the question endured, and throughout the long history, simpler barriers remained beside these mechanisms. Before the key, there was the stone, the screen, the nut, the latch, and the wooden beam. Clay seals could show that a doorway or container had been disturbed. Families, neighbors, guards, and shared customs protected places through presence and knowledge. Then came wooden pin locks in ancient Egypt and the wider Near East. Though the exact first dates remain uncertain, their large keys raised wooden pins so that a bolt could slide. Greek and Roman craftspeople used diverse bars, bolts, lifting devices, warded mechanisms, tumbler arrangements, and portable locks. Metal keys became smaller and easier to carry. Some Roman keys were made as rings, combining possible function with decoration, authority, or status. Medieval doors, gates, cupboards, and chests were secured by overlapping layers of hardware and human responsibility. The iron key developed its familiar bow, shank, and bit. The key could belong to an office and duty rather than to an individual owner. Warded locks offered a fixed interior pathway. Their shaped keys passed around metal obstructions and turned the bolt. Locksmiths heated iron, worked it over anvils, cut it with chisels, refined it with files, and adjusted each moving part. In the 18th and 19th centuries, inventors pursued closer precision. Barron's lever lock required controlled lifting. Bramah used sliders moved to measured positions. Chubb's detector lock could register certain improper disturbances. The Yale family helped establish the compact cylinder pin tumbler, with its flat key, cuts, spring-loaded pins, shear line, and rotating plug. Industrial production made locks and keys available in greater numbers. Keys gathered on hooks in hotels and offices, in cabinets at railway stations, and in the pockets of people who used them each day. Padlocks secured luggage, gates, lockers, and bicycles. Automobile keys gradually became part of 20th century life. Combination dials replaced the shaped key with a sequence. Cards and electronic readers made permissions easier to change. Fobs spoke to vehicles by coded radio. Biometric systems compared measured patterns. Phones began carrying digital credentials, yet metal keys remained. They remain because they are durable, clear in their purpose, affordable, and independent of electrical power. A simple key can wait in a drawer for years and still explain itself at a glance. Old and new systems continue together. There's no single line from primitive to perfect. A wooden bar may still secure a gate. A lever lock may protect one door, while a pin tumbler protects another. A vault may use combinations and time controls. A hotel may use cards. A home may use a metal key, a code, a phone, or several methods at once. Each arrangement works within a larger setting. Door, frame, hinges, bolt, installation, credentials, and human habits all matter. No lock provides absolute security by itself. Perhaps this is why the ordinary household key remains so reassuringly modest. It does not promise perfection. It performs one clear task. At the end of a journey, a familiar key is found by touch. It slides into the lock. Inside pieces rise or move into place. The cylinder turns, the latch withdraws, and the door opens. Later, when the day is complete, the action is reversed. The door closes, the bolt settles. The key is removed and placed in a small bowl, on a hook, or in another familiar resting place. Not every person's experience of home, privacy, or safety is the same. The meanings of doors and keys vary. Still, the quiet act of setting access in order can offer a simple sense of completion. What needed to be opened has been opened. What may now rest has been closed. Across the building, different fastenings settle into stillness. A plain latch rests against its frame. A pin tumbler plug is held by its pins. A card reader waits without sound. A gate bar lies in its brackets. Nearby, a few keys remain motionless. One may be flat and bright. Another may be old and dark with age. One may open a cabinet. Another may belong to a door used every day. A digital credential rests unseen within a phone, while a mechanical key waits without needing power or attention. All of them belong to the long human work of deciding who may enter, who may care for what is stored, and how a place may be left in peace. The story began with a shaded room and a wooden beam. It ends, for now, in another quiet room. The doors are closed for the evening. The bolts have settled into their places. The keys have been laid safely aside. And through the stillness, the long history of shelter, trust, responsibility, and access rests quietly for the night.